Hot Air, Cool People with Dr. Gunz, a podcast devoted to cool professionals with cool ideas for a planet full of hot air. Today's guest is Dr. Myles Sergeant, a family physician who believes that healing the planet is part of healing ourselves. From planting trees at hospitals to founding national sustainability projects, Myles has spent decades connecting climate, community, and care. In this episode, he shares how nature, healthcare, and climate solutions can come together, and why he still believes these challenges are solvable.
We're here with Dr. Myles Sergeant, who is a family physician who has worked with vulnerable populations, including people experiencing homelessness and/or addictions and the elderly over the past 25 years. His work involves recognizing the intersection between environmental issues and health. He's dedicated to addressing climate change issues and is co-founder of Partnerships for Environmental Action by Clinicians and Communities for Healthcare Facilities, also known as Peach Ontario, as well as the charity Trees for Hamilton, which he founded in 2012, and the not-for-profit Shelter Health Network in 2005. Welcome.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me.
So there's so many things that I want to talk to you about, so we'll have to see how much time we have.
Fair enough.
But first, I have always been so interested in your work with trees. So how did you end up founding a tree NGO while you were a busy clinician and a father as well, managing all your kids? What drove you to do this?
Well, we moved to a farm about 20 years ago, and I was determined to do something on the farm and not simply rent it out. And I thought, what am I passionate about? What am I interested in? And it was trees. I'd always loved trees as a kid. So we started planting trees. And at first I thought it might be a tree farm, but I fell in love with the trees, couldn't sell them. And in terms of starting the not-for-profit, again, my work downtown in the inner city in Hamilton, there were days in the summer which were extremely hot, and I would be working out of one of their shelters. And sometimes the air conditioning wasn't working. And I one of those days you're just looking at the clock and you can't wait to get out of the clinic because you're sweating. I don't know if that ever happens to you. And, I just can't wait to get home because I'm going home to air conditioning and trees and all, the great things in the west end of the city. And so I thought, look, if this is good for me and my family, it's good for the community. There's a lot of information now about heat islands in the city and the problems or association between disease and living in hotter areas of a city. So it was sort of a natural thing. I was learning a lot about trees at home on the farm, and I spoke to someone who's a mentor. Her name is Lorraine, who would come to the farm. She worked for the government Ministry of Environment and would help landowners with various projects. And I said, is there a need for a charity in Hamilton? And she said there was. And that's how it started.
Now, my understanding is you also started planting at the hospitals.
Yeah. So I have just realizing your first question about how did I have time. I think that I'm trying to look back because it's been 11 years now. I think in the first few years, it might have averaged out to 3-4 hours a week. And of course, you need to do paperwork and to show your taxes and all that sort of thing. And then, of course, the busy seasons are spring and fall, particularly April and October when we're actually doing tree plantings. So I don't know that it was a ton of time, Anna, initially when we were only doing a few plantings per year. Yeah. Now, in terms of planting at the hospitals, we realized pretty early on that people in our group and our small board were all interested in the intersection between human health and trees. And you could certainly make the argument that every tree planted in the world is beneficial to human health. There are the global aspects of trees and the local aspects of trees globally, of course, helping the whole oxygen CO2 balance. And locally, just so many benefits. And there have been studies done which show that when someone's in hospital and they're looking outside at trees, they do much better in every outcome you can measure. And maybe the most important one is getting home sooner. So that was kind of an obvious thing. When I do my talks, sometimes I show a photograph of the Hamilton General There's a website, I think it's postcards.com or some such thing, which shows postcards of the Hamilton hospitals from, the late 1800s, early 1900s. And back then, the hospitals were beautiful and they had all sorts of trees and gardens. And so somewhere in the last 100 years, we sort of lost the plot as far as I'm concerned. And so again, tying those things together, making a hospital beautiful, making it a place, potentially an oasis, a place that, look, no one wants to go to a hospital, but let's make it as nice as we can. And let's make the views beautiful. And hopefully that is part of the healing process.
Well, and I think you're using the word healing, which, we're traditionally physicians were healers, and somewhere in the last 100 or more years, we've moved further and further away from that. And the conversation is health, but we're really talking about illness. So I totally agree with you in terms of the fact that we've sort of had this medical industrialization of healthcare. And through that, we've really lost the healing power and the importance of nature and healing is immeasurable. So that's wonderful work. I couldn't agree more. When you were working on your NGO, and I know you've had more recent work with green teams and then developing peach, but before all of that, is trees and your tree NGO, was that something that you would discuss with your patients over the last 10 years? Or was this sort of a separate part of yourself and a separate part of your practice?
Well, I think initially it was separate. And as you can imagine, again, it's been 11 years now, and I think we've done 70 community plantings now. In the first few years, we were just starting to develop partnerships and figuring out, where the opportunities were. And as we did develop partnerships, both with conservation areas and big places like Royal Botanical Gardens, as well as hospitals and long-term care facilities, we started to think about volunteer groups and doing things by themes. And so one of the themes was healthcare workers, there was one planting, I think we had 16 family doctors out at a conservation area. And we typically do bring medical students and residents out for them to learn the benefits of trees and nature. And so I have an unusual career as a family doctor. At this stage, I only do inpatient medicine. I work at a complex care hospital, and I also work at an inpatient addiction facility. And I think that the executive director of the addiction facility saw, an opportunity for us to bring the guys in the facility out to plant trees. And so we started doing that probably a few years into us running the charity. So we would, it wouldn't be me typically, but, the director, one of the lead counselors would ask the guys in the house, who wants to go plant trees today? And then they'd come out and to the conservation area, and I would be there, and they'd kind of be surprised to see me. And we plant trees together. And those guys, at least the place that I work at, are typically guys who've lost everything because of their addiction and have typically ended up being homeless. And often have started with addiction as young as 10 or 12 years old and barely know what life is like without addiction. So it's extremely rewarding to see the guys having a great time and realizing how much they love the outdoors and realizing how great it is to give back to society. So that's been a fun thing. I think we've probably done that 8 or 10 times now with that group.
That's wonderful. You're sort of ahead of the curve with the horticultural therapy and healing. Now there's so much sort of medical traditional evidence to back up what you've sort of intuitively found your way doing.
Well, I would say that I would agree I'm ahead of the curve. I don't think I'm that far ahead of the curve in anything that I've done. Sometimes you think you've thought of something which is completely unique and original, but it's a big world out there. There's usually someone who's done it before you. And, so a lot of these things that I've done, if you look back at the literature, some of the literature that I quote goes back 30 years in terms of the benefits of nature for humans. Yeah, it's been around for a while.
Well, and beyond that, and, that relationship between land and people is so embedded in Indigenous cultures as well. It's the sort of the behind backwardsness of our modern medicine. I'd really like to hear more about peach. What was the gap that you saw and the vision that you had that led to the development of Peach. And that it would be wonderful if you could talk a little bit about the organization and what it was intended to do and where you see it now.
Okay, well, the beginning for me was the fact that we had done the tree charity. That group of people, there's 5 of us in that board. We'd done the tree charity for 10 years. And so at the end of the 10 years, which is just over a year ago, I was thinking, what else can I do, or where can I go from here? And look, we've done a lot of good, obviously, with that charity. I think at that point we'd done about 60 community plantings and gotten a lot of volunteers out, put a lot of trees in the ground in important places. But when you think about climate change, it's hardly even a drop in the bucket. And I'm at a stage of my life in my career that I could put more time into this, and not everybody has that luxury. So I really was looking around for the next thing to do. Another mentor of mine is Linda Varangu, who was being part of the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare. So I started to chat with her about what might be next and where the gaps were. And although the coalition's been around for, I'm going to say 22 years, and does this type of work, I think she felt there was a need for clinician leadership to really, get into the hospitals, long-term care facilities, et cetera. And look, once again, this is not an original idea. This is essentially looking at what the NHS has been doing with their sustainable healthcare system for the last 10 years and saying, how can we implement some of those concepts here? So I think that's where it starts. And looking around at the other big, health greening groups out there and realizing no one was doing precisely this. So if you want me to go into now what we were doing, I think that I might have a vision of where something's going to go, but I think in this complicated world, you need to adapt. And in the beginning, we were thinking this is a grassroots project, and we would look at all the great projects and things that are happening around the province. And there's lots of what I call, climate superstars out there around Ontario, and in all kinds of areas. I mean, I'm not just talking about clinicians here. I'm talking about the food sector, the building energy sector, transportation, et cetera. So to meet those people, see what they're doing at their facility, and then to mobilize those ideas. So another key person in our group is Sujani Kandasamy, who's a PhD in knowledge translation. And she's just been a key person all the way along. She had co-founded Starfish, which has been around for quite a while now. And so she helps to, put those ideas out there in a way that people can understand easily. So that's what we were doing. We were collecting the stories, putting them up on a website, pushing them out on social media. And in the beginning, I would have thought, again, grassroots, we're hopefully getting nurses and docs and clinicians interested in this and to take action. But as you know, since we started this project, wave 4 of COVID hit a month later, and then there was wave 5, 6, 7. So it's been a very tough time, obviously, to get people on board. And so the surprise has been the fact that leadership in many places has been interested in taking these ideas on and pushing them forward. And so, look, we still look for the grassroots help and people who are interested, but we have since then made a guide for leadership. This is now going to be part of Accreditation Canada for hospitals, and it will be for long-term care as well. So leaders are going to need to know how to do this for their facilities. So I think, again, one of the best things we've done is create this guidebook. It's a 14-page infographic, very easy to read. And because we are in a climate emergency and we need to teach people to go after what we consider to be the big items, in the middle of that infographic, there is a page with check boxes on it with 20 items that, look, we could have a great debate about what the biggest 20 items are. We were going after the biggest 20. Hopefully we got 20 of the top 25 in there. And again, they come from all different sectors. So within food, it would be decreasing waste and having more plant-rich menus. Within buildings and energy, it's, having an energy manager. In the hospitals, it's decreasing your operating room ventilation rates overnight. Medications, massive. The medications are 25% of our carbon footprint in Canada, and it's really all about the production of medications. And I think you can make a good argument that we do overprescribe as physicians. So there's opportunities there. So I could go through this whole thing, but probably best for people just to take a look at it.
Where can they find that?
It is on our website under projects on the Peach Health Ontario website. And this was done, by the way, in collaboration with the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare. So it would be on their website as well, the Leadership Guide for Sustainable Healthcare.
Fantastic. So for people who are in the healthcare sector, who are interested in sustainability, who are aware of the climate crisis, what advice would you give them getting started? That's, I think, the hardest thing. There's so many people who care, and they care so much, and it's really hard to know which direction to go or who to talk to or whether you can make a difference. Do you have any words of wisdom that you could pass on after all the work you've done?
Well, I would say don't be afraid to get started. As you know, there's a study done by Fiona Miller in Toronto looking at the UHN group of hospitals and 1,600 employees, and 96% felt their facility should be doing more to green their health facility. I think you've done a similar study, Anna. So the bottom line is the majority of healthcare workers care about this and want to do something. And I know that psychologically, one of the things that holds people back is the idea that they'll be perceived as a tree hugger, but it's just not the case anymore. People understand this. So I think that you start out by finding allies. And so the green team at my hospital really started by the first tree planting that we did. And there's a group that we work with called Trees for Life, and they on their website you can find something called Trees for Health, and you can reach out to them, and they will help you plant trees at their facility. So it may sound like a monstrous task and undoable task, but look, you can reach out to them. We're partnered with them. We want to help people plant at their facilities. And the point of this is that was an opening for our green team, getting people out and finding out who's interested in planting trees. And then we get out there and we talk together about what other things we can do. And that ended up leading to having a green team. But again, I think it starts with finding allies, which gives you more confidence. I suppose the other thing I would say is, to look at the resources out there, like the Canadian Coalition website, our Peach website, Cascade's website, and learn what the big items are. And in my mind, one of the biggest items is the supply chain. I spoke about medications within the supply chain. There's a study done in The Lancet a year ago looking at the National Health System again in the UK and their carbon footprint within healthcare. And transportation ends up being 10%, which is smaller than you'd think. Of course, every percent counts when you're trying to get to carbon zero. Buildings and energy ends up being 10%, again, smaller than you'd think. So what is the big piece of the pie? It is the supply chain. And in that study, I think it's roughly 65% supply chain, which shocked me at the time. And now I get it. There have been studies done more recently, which suggest it's actually 80 to 85% of the problem. So I just tell people to try to go after the big issues. And of course, so supply chain is the big one. So what is supply chain? It's really all the things we consume. So when you think of a big health facility, long-term care hospital, all the gloves coming into the building, the masks coming into the building, MRI machines, office furniture, computers, everything that we buy has to be dug out of the ground, shipped around the world for manufacturing, shipped, packaging, shipped to the hospital, used, and then shipped to the dump, essentially. And that's what we call the linear economy. And, I think the big change that society needs to make is to move to the circular economy. Again, that's something you could Google and look up on the internet. A bit of a complicated concept to understand, but it's basically the idea. If you can imagine someone supplying, let's go with a computer for you. Are they designing that computer from the outset to be something which has a second life, can be used in some secondary way and not thrown out? Is the computer being designed to be able to be used for 10, 15 years, or is it being designed to be thrown out in 3 years and outdated? Are there replaceable parts for that computer? Are you building that computer from recycled material, or are you digging it out of the ground? So these are the kind of concepts which sound radical, but they are starting to happen and they need to happen. So influencing that, I know that sounds hard. I think that, one of the biggest projects we're doing is meeting with the procurement leads of the big hospitals or some of the big hospitals around the province and trying to get sustainability added to the language within RFPs or requests for proposals. Right now, RFPs, like any sector, are generally to do with cost and quality, but we need to add in a factor of sustainability. Ideally, that would be as high as 20 to 30%. I can tell you right now, we're kind of negotiating at around 10%, but it's a start. And so that filters down to suppliers to say, hey, look, if you're going to be competitive on this bid, you need to show that you're a sustainable company and this is a sustainable product. And then that company has to go to their suppliers all around the world and say, look, we can't be a green company unless we're buying from green companies. And this to me is the great hope. Again, this being 80% of the issue, and to me, a potentially solvable issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to say about this issue?
Well, again, in following up about this idea about the supply chain and how you can impact it, so you can impact it through the facility you're working at by, 1, buying less, 2, trying to buy used or recycled if that's possible, and 3, by buying smarter and looking at the companies you're buying from. And there is actually a way of doing this. There are a few companies in the world that are not-for-profits that have been around for a while that essentially I'll just mention one, CDP, which is the Carbon Disclosure Project, has been around, I think, since 2000, cdp.net. I have no affiliation with them. But back in 2000, they were asking companies around the world to disclose their carbon footprint. And you can imagine most companies had no clue or maybe no interest, and it was a very small operation. They now have over 20,000 companies reporting their carbon footprint, their forest footprint, and their water footprint. So you can look up companies, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or a medical devices company, and see how that company rates. And you might not be able to find out the specific product that you're buying, but at least you can look at the company and see how well they're doing. So, I mean, that's one major thing that we can be doing as a society. And the other thing is in our personal lives, we can be making the same decisions. And we need to be supporting industry which sells reused goods, and whether it's clothing or other things. I mean, this is really the way we need to go. I used to go to, a cobbler to have my dress shoes rehealed. And unfortunately, during COVID, he closed his shop. And I don't know where the closest cobbler is now, but it's actually those kind of industries we do need to support. And there are websites out there in terms of buying things. There's websites for, shoes, for example, and looking up your favorite shoe company and seeing how well they're doing. So I think this is a big impact people can make as individuals.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today. The last question I have for you is, where do you find hope for the future, given everything we know about the world today and the climate crisis?
Well, I suppose I'm an optimist by nature, so that might help. I'm also, with doing this work, of course, you find other people who are hopeful and are working hard. And I find the people who are willing to chat on the weekends and the evenings, which I know sounds crazy, but there's a lot of work to be done. So I think working with some of these people gives me hope. I know there's a lot of people out there who are passionate about this. And again, as I'm saying, I think that some of these things are solvable problems. And, I don't completely understand why more people aren't doing this type of work. And I think that's one of the reasons people don't see it as a solvable problem. But I absolutely think it is a solvable problem.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Hot Air, Cool People with Dr. Anna Gunz. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show and share it with a friend. In this episode, Dr. Myles Sergeant reflected on the role healthcare can play in responding to the climate crisis, from reducing the environmental impact of medical systems to reconnecting care with nature and community. His perspective reminds us that climate action in healthcare isn't just about emissions or efficiency, but about protecting well-being now and into the future. Special thanks to our guests and the Climate Change, Environment, and Health production team. This episode was produced by Abby Walker and Jakob Wilk and managed by Danielle Pineda and Olivia D'Andrea Brooks. Show artwork was created by Lainey Bolio. Details and links are in the episode notes. Until next time.